This happened 3 nights ago. I'm a nurse at a busy urban hospital. I'm 32 years old, and I've been working nights for over a decade. I thought I was tough enough to handle the quiet hours, but that night was different. The hospital felt older than its years, with dimly lit hallways and the sharp smell of antiseptic. I went through my rounds, checking on patients, making sure everyone was all right. I thrived in the quiet, but that night, something felt off. Around the middle of my shift, I heard a child cry. It was faint, but it echoed through the empty hallway. I tried to dismiss it. No children were in the hospital at that hour. I shook my head and moved on, convincing myself it was my imagination. Still, the crying returned, haunting me like a lost ghost. It made the quiet feel heavy. The next few nights passed, but the crying didn't stop. It was unsettling. Sometimes I thought I could see a shadow moving, darting just out of the corner of my eye. I'd blink, and it disappeared. Other nurses began to mention odd things too. Medications went missing. Some rooms felt colder than usual. I didn't want to sound crazy, but it wore me down. One particular night, I stood at the nurses' station when I heard whispering. It was low and soft, like voices talking just out of reach. I looked at my colleagues, but they didn't seem to hear it. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked. They just shrugged, focused on their tasks. My heart raced. Was I losing it? Was I the only one feeling this way? Then, as I approached room 103, everything changed. A deep dread washed over me. The crying had grown louder and more desperate. I don't think I wanted to know its source. I took a deep breath, palms sweaty, and stepped closer. I could have knocked. I could have called for someone. But I froze. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from inside the room. The door slammed shut, and I stumbled backward. Ice water surged through my veins. I wanted to turn and run, but part of me knew I should have looked inside. Instead, I hurried back to the nurses' station. That feeling of dread was like a weight on my chest. Something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. Or maybe something darker was lurking in that hospital. When I reached the nurses' station, I couldn't shake it off. My thoughts raced. As I turned to leave, I heard it again. A child's voice, soft but clear, whispering my name. I didn't look back. I just wanted to get out of there. I've never forgotten what happened that night, and I don't think I ever will. The next night, I felt fatigue pulling at me like a heavy blanket. I arrived at the hospital, dreading the long hours ahead. I tried to push the unsettling memories aside, focusing on my tasks. As I walked through the familiar corridors, the fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting an eerie glow. When my shift began, there was an unusually tense atmosphere. My colleagues exchanged glances, and the whispers about strange occurrences had grown louder. I forced a smile, but beneath the surface, anxiety festered. As I made my rounds, my heart sank when I reached room 103 again. The door was slightly ajar, and I paused, debating whether I should just move on. Suddenly, the sound of muffled laughter drifted out, followed by the sound of small footsteps. I froze. Were there kids in the hospital after all? I leaned in, my breath caught in my throat. "Hello?" I called softly, my voice quivering. Silence answered, thick and suffocating. I shifted, ready to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I should investigate. I pushed the door open wider. The room was empty, but the window was wide open, fluttering curtains rhythmically dancing in the breeze. I rushed in, peering under the bed and behind the curtains, but found nothing. My heart raced as I turned back to the door. That same chill swept over me again. I felt as if something was watching me. Then I noticed a small, worn-out toy on the floor. A doll, its eyes wide and unblinking, its hair tangled. I picked it up, brushing off the dust. The eerie feeling intensified. How did this end up here? No children had been in this room since I started working. A wave of unease washed over me, and I dropped the doll like it was on fire. I hurried out of the room and shut the door behind me, my hands shaking. I tried to gather myself at the nurses' station, but my colleagues were gossiping animatedly about a patient in room 204 who had been talking to someone no one could see. My chest tightened at the thought. Was there something more sinister happening at the hospital? As the hours crawled by, I kept glancing at the clock. I wanted to leave, but I also wanted answers. The cries and whispers had increased, surrounding me like unseen shadows. Each time I tried to relax, the quiet would shatter, drawing me back to the unsettling mystery of that room. When the night shift neared its end, I decided to check on room 103 one more time, hoping to make sense of everything. My heart raced with each hesitant step. I approached the door and reached for the handle. But then I heard it. A soft giggle. Unmistakable and cruelly taunting. It came from the room behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. My hand shook as I backed away, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on me again. I stumbled away from the door, desperate for an answer, something to reassure me that it was all in my head. That's when I saw it. Movement at the edge of my vision. A shadow darted past the far end of the hallway. Just as the lights flickered, it vanished around the corner, and I felt a breath of cold air brush against my skin. I took a step forward, uncertainty flooding my mind. Should I follow? Or run? Maybe I'd get answers after all. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the chilling atmosphere. The shadow was gone, but what lingered was worse. An overwhelming sense of dread. I could either turn back to the safety of the nurse's station or chase after whatever had just slipped away from me. The thought of ignoring it gnawed at me. I pressed on, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The lights flickered again, and I clutched the wall for support. I rounded the corner, half expecting to see someone waiting there, but the hallway only stretched out in front of me, desolate and unnaturally quiet. It struck me that I was alone. Really alone. Every instinct screamed at me to return, but curiosity pushed me forward. I reached for my phone, hoping a small light would more than reassure me. As I scanned the darkened corridor, something caught my eye. A door at the end, cracked open slightly, with a dim light spilling into the darkness. Room 204. I knew that was the room a few of my colleagues had been talking about, the one with the patient who spoke to imaginary friends. My heart thudded against my ribcage as I approached. Something felt very wrong, too wrong to ignore. The path felt longer with every step. As I neared, the voices began. Muffled whispers floated through the crack. Some sounded like childlike laughter. I hesitated, listening closely. Then I heard it again. A high-pitched giggle, unmistakably delighted. It chilled me to the bone. In a moment of weakness, I knocked. "Hello? Is anyone in there?" My voice sounded shaky, even to my own ears. Silence answered before the whispers grew louder, almost drowning out my heartbeat. "Stay. Play with us." The words sent a shiver through me. They were clearly not talking to me. I couldn't stay here. I turned to leave, my instincts screaming at me to run, but the door creaked open wider. My heart raced as I was confronted by the unsettling sight of a nurse, her back turned toward me, peering into the room. "Jessica, what are you doing?" she asked without turning around. I was just about to check on room 204, I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't," she said firmly, still not facing me. "You don't want to go in there. It's not safe." Her words hung in the air between us, thick with unspoken things. Suddenly, a loud crash came from within room 204, causing both of us to jump. My heart raced, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. Instinctively, I stepped back. Before I could react, the nurse turned sharply, her face pale. "We need to leave, now!" The urgency in her voice pulled me away from my fears. I turned to follow her, but just as we made a break for it, I caught a glimpse into the room. The figure of a child appeared, no older than 6, sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring right at me with wide dark eyes. Then everything went dark. I gasped as light flooded back in, illuminating the nurse's frantic expression. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. "What just happened?" I stammered, still reeling from the child's gaze. She shook her head, eyes wide, dragging me away from the door. "We can't talk here. Just trust me. I barely had time to process her words before she pulled me into a side room, quickly shutting the door behind us. My breaths came in shallow gasps as I searched her face for answers. "What's going on? Why can't we go back?" The nurse steadied herself against the wall, her face softening just a bit. "My name is Sarah. We need to keep this quiet. Things in that room, they're not what they seem. That child isn't just a patient. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. It's seen things. People have gone in, and they don't always come back out the same. She paused, glancing back toward the door, her expression tightening. I know it sounds crazy, but multiple cases have been reported. Something is trapped in there. The weight of her words pressed down on me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. But it was just a kid. She cut me off, urgency creeping back into her tone. No, Jessica, you don't understand. It can mimic a child's voice, but it's something else entirely. The laughter and the whispers, they're not innocent. They lure you in. I felt the panic rise again. Then why did you tell me to come here? I thought you'd be okay, she admitted. You knew nurses are eager. I didn't think you'd push it like this. Now we need to... A loud bang echoed from room 204, shaking the walls. We both flinched. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, and I stepped back instinctively. Sarah pressed a finger to her lips, urging silence. The noise had been accompanied by a distorted giggle that seeped through the door, and dread pooled in my stomach. Without a word, she took my wrist and began to lead me to the back exit of the room. We need to get out of here, now. As we hurried down the dimly lit corridor, my mind raced. I was flooded with questions. Should I have just ignored it? How many people had she helped? What triggered that child to appear? I could hardly keep pace with her as fear gnawed at my resolve. Just as we reached the stairwell, the lights flickered again, plunging us into near darkness. My heart sank further as I heard it. Another giggle, this one much closer, echoing from behind us. Before I could react, Sarah paused, her face drained of color. Stay here, she whispered, releasing my wrist. I'll go check. No! I grabbed her arm, but she shook her head. Just wait. I watched as she stepped back into the hallway, the shadows swallowing her whole. My pulse quickened as I stood alone, waiting in the faint glow of the exit sign. The whispers began again, this time surrounding me, enveloping my thoughts with chilling promises. Then everything fell silent. I strained to hear, but the world around me had changed. I could still feel the walls closing in, but now the laughter seemed to be coming from everywhere. And then, amid the stillness, I saw something moving in the darkness. Someone, or something, was approaching. I stood frozen, my heart pounding as shadows twisted and shifted. A figure materialized, small and thin, almost childlike, just like the boy I had seen moments before. My breath became shallow, and I clutched the edge of the doorframe, fighting the urge to flee. Jessica? The voice was soft and sweet, echoing through the silence. But there was an edge to it, something that felt wrong. It sounded just like the child, but deeper, somehow twisted. Sarah? I called, hoping my nurse had not ventured far. No answer. Only that laughter echoed back, sending icy fingers crawling up my arms. The figure took a step closer, and my stomach dropped. It was not just a child anymore. Shadows clung to its form like a shroud, distorting its features. Are you scared? It chirped, tilting its head, mimicking the voice of innocence. I'll keep you safe. I didn't want to believe my instincts, but I felt the overwhelming need to run. I took a step back, and then the creature lunged at me. I felt a rush of air as it brushed past, tantalizingly close. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of its face. A twisted smile spread wide, teeth jagged, eyes gleaming with hunger. Jessica! Sarah's voice sliced through the horror of that sinister grin. She rushed back into the stairwell, eyes wild and alert. Get back! Instinct took over as I sprinted toward her, nearly colliding into Sarah as she slammed the door between us and the creature. Panting, I leaned against the door, my thoughts racing. What was that? What is happening? I told you, it lures you in. We can't stay here. It'll find a way. The cold metal of the doorknob felt clammy beneath my palm as she pulled me away. Where do we go? I stammered, panic creeping into my voice. There's another way out. Down the basement stairs to the employee parking. It's our best chance. She glanced back at the door, listening for any signs of pursuit. But we need to move quickly. We hurried down the dark corridor, my mind spiraling through questions. How often had this happened? How many had been lost to whatever that thing was? That distorted laughter filled the air again, uncontainable and mocking. Then it stopped abruptly, a silence so deep it was suffocating. I exchanged a worried look with Sarah, my gut feeling that we were being watched. At the door to the basement, I hesitated, my hand trembling on the knob. What if it's down there? She shook her head fiercely. We can't let it trap us here. We have to take the chance. With determination lacing her words, Sarah pushed open the door, revealing a steep staircase spiraling down into darkness. The light from the corridor faded quickly, and I felt my heart hitch. Let's go, she urged, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the abyss. As we stumbled down the steps, I couldn't shake the feeling of something lurking just out of sight. Then I heard it again, the giggle, echoing down the stairs, wrapping around us. We were not alone. Before we reached the bottom, the door slammed shut above us, sealing off our escape. Go! Sarah shouted, urgency now tinged with desperation. I felt the air grow heavy with the quickening darkness as we descended deeper, racing against whatever was pursuing us. But as we reached the bottom, I wanted to cry out. There was something waiting for us on the other side of the door. A small shadow tapping lightly, a familiar voice calling my name, and then it hit me. It was not just another voice. It was the same laughter. The true horror of it all rushed over me. We need to go, I whispered, but it felt far too late. Something had already claimed this part of the hospital as its own, and I was terrified I was next. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room beyond. A chill swept over me as I squinted into the murky shadows. Anxiety clawed at my insides, twisting tightly. What now? I breathed. Keep your voice down, Sarah hissed, pulling me inside. The door swung shut behind us with a heavy thud, sealing off any chance of retreat. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of something chemical. I peered around, trying to spot any semblance of familiarity. Old medical equipment lay scattered across the floor, remnants of a forgotten world. The behavior of the room felt strange, as if caught between dimensions. Where are we? I whispered, clutching Sarah's arm. An old storage room. We need to find another way out. She moved cautiously toward the corner, her eyes darting around. That's when we heard it again. Soft, childlike giggles, echoing eerily across the room. My skin prickled as the laughter intertwined with my thoughts. What if it's still following us? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, fear quaking through my chest. It has to be close. Sarah's determination faltered for just a moment. We need to stay quiet. It's drawn to sound. Suddenly, a rustle echoed from behind a thick medical curtain draped in the corner. My breath hitched in my throat. For a moment, I swore I could sense a presence there, lurking just out of sight, waiting. Jessica, Sarah said, her voice laced with urgency. We can't just stand here. I forced myself to step forward, though every instinct screamed for me to retreat. What if it's a trap? Everything is a trap right now. There was a fierceness in her eyes that I wanted to trust. We cautiously approached the curtain and drew it back. I gasped. It was a crumpled figure. An old medical mannequin, pale and lifeless, propped against the wall. The sight sent a fresh wave of dread cascading through me. It's nothing, I said, trying to steady my breath. But in the back of my mind, I was certain it felt wrong to be so close to something that shouldn't exist in a place like this. Just then, I caught a glimpse of movement at the end of the room. The shadow that had been whispering along the walls now darted into clear view. My heart raced as I recognized the familiar outline. A small child, face hidden, fingers splayed against the wall, as if fixing its gaze on us through the darkness. Run! Sarah shouted, grabbing my arm. I stumbled backward, nearly crashing into the curtain, pleading with my mind to function, to do something rational. But the twisted laughter erupted again, drowning out my thoughts. The child's silhouette began to dissolve before my eyes, morphing into something much larger, a dark figure looming at the entrance of the room. The air thickened with dread. Where's the exit? I panicked, frantically searching for a way out. Sarah pointed to another door at the far side. There, go! We raced toward it, but my feet felt heavy, sluggish as if they were glued to the floor. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the menacing shadow moving closer. Fear coursed through me like fire. Almost there, I thought. But as we reached the door, it suddenly burst open. Standing before us was not just the figure. It was a creature, grotesque and warped. A twisted version of the innocence we had seen moments before. And the laughter didn't stop. "No!" I screamed as it lunged. Everything went black. I jolted awake, gasping for breath. Light flooded the room, blinding me momentarily. Panic surged through me as I sat up, frantically scanning my surroundings. I was in a small, sterile room, the walls a glaring white. A single fluorescent light flickered above. My heart raced, each beat sounding deafening in the silence. "Sarah?" I croaked, my voice dry and hoarse. "Over here, Jess." Her voice broke through the haze. I turned to see her slumped against the wall, her face pale and drawn. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by fear. "What happened?" "I don't know. One minute we were—" She paused, struggling to gather her thoughts. Then everything went black. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt miserable. "That thing—" I hesitated, not wanting to repeat what we had seen. "It lunged at us. We have to get out," she said, pushing herself up. She looked around, her eyes scanning for an exit. I got up, still feeling the dread lodged in my chest. "Was it real?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The child? The creature?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't know. But we can't stay here." We both moved toward the door we had just come through. It looked ordinary enough, but I hesitated. Something felt off, like the air was thickening around it, a pressure building. Before I could pull the door handle, a whisper floated through the air, a soft, childlike giggle. My stomach dropped, and I felt sick. "Did you hear that?" Sarah nodded, looking more terrified than before. "We need to hurry." We opened the door, and a long corridor stretched out ahead, dimly lit. The walls were lined with faded pictures of children dressed in hospital gowns. Their faces were eerily blank, and I couldn't shake the feeling they were watching us. "Let's go," Sarah urged. We rushed into the corridor, our footsteps echoing against the tiled floor. But as we moved, the laughter grew louder, swirling around us. It felt like it was coming from every direction. My heart raced, and my stomach churned with dread. "Jessica!" Sarah grabbed my arm. "Look!" At the far end of the corridor, a figure stood, outlined in the flickering light. I squinted, trying to make it out. It was the child again. The same small figure, backlit and shrouded in darkness, peering around the corner, just out of reach. "What do we do?" I whispered, feeling the cold grasp of fear tightening around my chest. The child stepped forward slightly, and I caught a glimpse of a small hand waving, beckoning us to come closer. My instincts screamed to run, to turn back. But Sarah was already moving. "We can't ignore it." We inched forward, drawn like moths to a flame. Each step felt deliberate, as if the child commanded us without saying a word. Just a few feet away now I could see its face, but it was still obscured under the dim light. Then, the child grinned, a wide, unsettling smile that seemed too big for its face. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement behind it, shadows shifting, whispering on the walls. My feet felt frozen again, and I couldn't breathe. The laughter reached a fever pitch, crashing over us like a wave. "Jess!" Sarah shouted, pulling me back. "Run!" We turned, tearing down the corridor. But as we sprinted, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was closing in around us, consuming everything in its path. And the laughter followed us, louder and more chaotic than before. "Where do we go?" I shouted in fear. "I don't know," she replied, panic etched on her face. Just then, I saw another door at the end of the corridor. It stood ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. "Over there!" I pointed, desperation filling my voice. As we rushed toward the door, the atmosphere shifted. I could feel it, a suffocating presence lining the walls, almost ready to swallow us whole. We were almost there, almost. Then I heard it again, the laughter, only this time mingled with something else. A deep, distorted growl. "No, no, no!" I screamed, shoving the door open with all my strength. And in that moment, everything spiraled into chaos. The door swung open, and I was hit with a rush of cool air. It felt like a lifeline. We stumbled into the room, quickly shutting the door behind us. I leaned against it, my breath coming in quick gasps, but I didn't dare take my eyes off the door. "Did we lose it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I don't think so," I replied, my heart still pounding. I turned around to take in our surroundings. The room was dimly lit, filled with medical equipment I barely recognized. The walls were lined with glass cabinets, and I caught a glimpse of eerie surgical instruments, all gleaming like teeth in the shadows. "Great," Sarah whispered, glancing around nervously. "Just what we need." I felt a tight knot of fear in my stomach. What were we doing here? There had to be a way out. "We need to keep moving," I said, forcing myself to take a step away from the door. The light flickered above us, making the shadows dance. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the hallway. I gasped and grabbed Sarah's arm, my grip instinctively tightening. "What was that?" "I don't know," she whispered back, fear etched in her eyes. We exchanged silent glances, weighing our options. Another noise, a distant scuffle, sent chills racing down my spine. "We can't stay here," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Just then, a soft thud sounded from behind one of the cabinets nearby. I felt my heart drop. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "Yes," Sarah replied, her face growing paler. I stepped closer to the cabinet, curious yet terrified. My heart raced as I tugged at the handle. It was locked. "What's behind here?" I asked myself aloud, glancing back at Sarah. Should we try to find another way out? Before she could respond, I heard a soft whimpering sound from behind the cabinet. It was faint, but unmistakable. "Jess." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "That's not just the wind, is it?" I swallowed hard. No, it's not. That impulse to flee battled with an overwhelming urge to know what was happening. I gritted my teeth, casting a glance at the door. What if it's someone who needs help? Sarah shook her head. Or it could be a trap. We can't take that chance. But I couldn't ignore the sound. It seemed to call to me, haunting yet desperate. I stepped closer, pressing my ear against the cold surface of the cabinet. "Hello?" I called out softly. "Is someone there?" The whimpering stopped. A chilling silence enveloped us. Then, another voice, distinct and eerie, carried a sing-song quality. "Help me, please." My blood ran cold. No child should sound like that. "We have to go, now." But as I turned to grab Sarah, the door rattled violently behind us. It felt like the thing we'd fled from had found us again. Panic struck again, and I rushed to pull Sarah toward the back of the room. "Through there!" I pointed at a small door at the far end, nearly camouflaged against the wall. It might lead somewhere safe. We dashed toward it, the sounds behind us growing louder. A growl accompanied by that horrifying laughter filled the air. "Open it!" Sarah screamed, pushing against the door as I fumbled with the handle. That's when I realized it was locked too. "Come on! We need to find a way out of here!" My voice cracked in desperation. I pushed against the door with everything I had, but it wouldn't budge. The pounding on the door increased, and fear coursed through me like ice. Then, I heard a new sound. A connection of twisted, high-pitched giggles mixed with something more sinister. "Jess! We're running out of time!" Sarah shouted, her eyes wide with terror. I needed to act fast. I turned to the cabinet, the whimpering voice echoing in my mind. "We can't stay! We can't stay here!" The door behind us splintered as something slammed into it, and I made my choice, racing back toward the cabinet. That was when everything went dark. I gasped as a surge of light flooded back into my vision. I was on the floor, disoriented. The cabinet loomed above me, and Sarah stood a few feet away, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. A sickening crunch echoed in the background, and I scrambled to my feet, taking in the chaos. "It's here," she whispered, terror creeping into her voice. I pivoted toward the door. It was splintered, but somehow still standing. The violent pounding had ceased, replaced by an unsettling calm. Goosebumps prickled my skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there was biding its time. "Jess, we need to find another way," Sarah urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't leave this room. What if it's safe?" I countered, trying to convince myself more than her. We had stumbled into something terrible, something alive. But we also had to find out what it was. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness again, I noticed a small desk tucked away in a corner. Papers were strewn all over it, and a computer flickered weakly. "Look, maybe we can find something useful," I said, moving towards it. Sarah hesitated. "What if it attracts attention?" I shrugged off the dread. "We need answers. We can't just hide forever." I reached the desk and began rifling through the papers. Most were illegible, scrawled with hasty notes in what looked like blood. But then I spotted something. An old patient file. My heart raced as I opened it. The first name I saw made my stomach drop. It was someone I knew. "Sarah, look at this," I said, holding it up. She edged closer, her brow furrowing with confusion. "Who is that?" "It's Mark, my neighbor. He went missing last month." The file contained strange symbols and unsettling details about experiments. The words bioenhancement and asymmetrical tests danced across the page. My eyes darted to the final line. Subject exhibited difficulty communicating post-procedure. "What does this even mean?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know. But whatever they were doing, it wasn't normal." I felt cold sweat trickle down my back. Recalling the whimpering and that eerie sing-song voice sent a chill through me. The lights flickered again, and I noticed the shadow back at the door, almost like fingers curling around the edge. I pointed. "Something's coming." "In here!" Sarah shouted, pulling me through a narrow space between stacked boxes behind the desk. It wasn't a perfect hiding spot, but it was better than being exposed. We squeezed in, hearts pounding, breathing shallow. Then came the soft creak of the door opening. The shadow loomed larger, almost blocking out the faint light from the hallway. I held my breath, straining to make out details, but I could only see a dark silhouette. "Please, help me!" The sing-song voice echoed again, trickling into my ears and wrapping around my mind. I covered my mouth to suppress a scream. "It sounds just like the files said. Like it's trying to lure us out," I whispered to Sarah, who was shaking next to me. We huddled closer in the cramped space. As the silhouette moved further into the room, it paused, the air growing thick with dread. Then we heard it. A soft giggle, inexplicably close. "I can help you." In that moment, I knew we had only one option left. We had to face whatever horror awaited us, or it would find us where we cowered. That realization was terrifying, but the quiet was the worst part. Something was coming, and it wanted us. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the walls around me close in. The giggling echoed like a maddening symphony, wrapping itself around my heart. I had to do it. I had to face whatever terror lurked outside our cramped hideout. With shaky breaths, I pushed myself against the boxes, mentally preparing for what lay ahead. "Sarah," I whispered. "We have to move." "Are you sure?" she replied, her voice barely masking the fear that crept into her words. "No, but we can't stay here. Whatever that thing is, it's toying with us. It's toying." I took one last deep breath and squeezed out from the narrow gap, startling Sarah as she followed. As we crept back into the room, my heart raced. The door hung partially ajar, casting a shadow across the floor. The flickering bulb above buzzed anxiously, revealing just enough of the room for us to see. The laughter grew softer, replaced with whispers that held our names like a chant. I glanced back at Sarah. "We need to get to that other door. Over there." I nodded toward the door that led further into the darkness. "Jess, wait," she started, but the urgency in my mind drowned out her warning. I bolted to the door, yanking it open with enough force that it nearly flew off its hinges. The hallway was empty, but cold air brushed against my skin, chilling me to the bone. Without thinking, I surged forward, adrenaline racing through my veins. "Jessica, wait!" Sarah cried. But before she could catch up, I heard a shriek, an unbearable wail that pierced through the silence. The walls felt like they echoed with my screams. But I pushed ahead. I had to keep moving. I rounded a corner, and the hallway twisted unexpectedly into a larger room, filled with what looked like long-abandoned medical supplies. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, revealing instruments that gleamed in a way that made my stomach turn. Something felt very wrong about this place. "Jess!" I heard Sarah call, skidding to a halt behind me. "Where are you going?" "Sarah, we can't stay back there. We need to find an exit." "Do you hear that?" she asked, taking a step closer. Just as I sensed what she meant, the childlike giggle returned, now echoing from the shadows. "Join-a-me," it beckoned, sweet and persuasive. It filled the air, wrapping around us like fog. I recoiled. "No, we can't." Suddenly, a figure appeared from the corner of the room, its small form illuminated by the flickering lights. It was the very same child, smiling wide with those hollow eyes. "Play with us." "Come on!" I shouted, forcing myself to move again. I grabbed Sarah's arm just as the child began to inch closer, the laughter reverberating through the space. "Don't let it pull you in!" Sarah shrieked, but her grip was slippery. She struggled against whatever darkness had a hold of her mind. "Run!" I screamed, dragging her toward another exit. We pushed through another door as I instinctively navigated, shoving forward until we tumbled into a small stairwell. The door slammed violently behind us, reverberating with a loud thud. Breathless and trembling, we stumbled downward into the darkness below. "Where does this go?" Sarah gasped, gripping the rail as the steps felt steep under our feet. "I don't know," I admitted, panic shooting through me, "but it has to go somewhere." We descended into the abyss, my heart racing in tandem with my thoughts. I still felt the remnants of that childlike laughter echoing in my ears. Was it a trap? Were we running into even worse horrors? Finally, we reached the bottom, and I peeked cautiously through another door. To my surprise, we stepped into an old storage area filled with dusty boxes, abandoned, but eerily empty. The only light fell from a small, grimy window on the opposite side. "Maybe we can find a way out through here," Sarah suggested, moving toward the window. "Stay alert," I replied, scanning the room. "If it follows us down here—" But just as the words left my mouth, the door behind us creaked open. "Jessica!" the sing-song voice echoed, dripping with honeyed malice. I whirled around, but all I could see was shadow. "Keep going!" I shouted, urging Sarah toward the window. "We don't have much time!" As we rushed for the exit, fear clawed at my mind. Would I make it out of this madness? And what awaited us on the other side? Just as Sarah reached the window, I heard a soft thud behind us. It was then I turned back for just a moment too long. An indistinct shadow peeked through the door, that unnaturally wide grin spreading across its grotesque face. "Don't let it get to you," Sarah cried, pulling me with her as we both flung ourselves toward the window frame. We squeezed through effortlessly, gasping as fresh air slapped my face. I landed hard on the pavement outside, dirt and grass beneath me, marveling that we'd finally made it. But as I looked back, the window no longer led to safety, only darkness. The laughter faded, leaving behind an unsettling silence. "Did we escape?" Sarah whispered, kneeling next to me. I shook my head, dread tightening around me like a noose. "I don't know," I admitted. As we stood there, a question loomed in the air, heavier than the darkness we left behind. Had we truly escaped? Or was this just another facade in a horror that was far from over? I moved to stand, my mind racing. In the distance, I caught sight of the hospital looming ahead, its lights flickering like a heartbeat, beckoning us unknowingly back into the fray. "Jess, we need to go." Those words bounced in my head as I glanced at the hospital, then at Sarah. I was too afraid to look back at what might still lurk behind us, the laughter still echoing in my mind. "Yeah," I replied, my heart heavy with unanswerable questions. "Let's go." As we navigated the path away from that darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling. We were never truly free.